Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. An old friend is here. It's T.A. Barron with his final book in the Atlantis trilogy, and it's called Atlantis Lost. If you love fantasy and you loved his Merlin saga, you're gonna love this one. Well, Tom, it's so great to have you here. We missed you. It's so wonderful to have you back at Anderson's in Naperville.
I'm thrilled to be back, Becky. It's great.
You know, I
love this story.
Oh, well, we love having you here, and we have loved your books for so many years. But now you are finishing up a trilogy.
Yes.
So Atlantis Lost, the third book in the Atlantis series. So how does it feel to have this ended? And will you? Because you've done other series, and it must be, you know, you miss these characters.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I dream about them.
Yeah.
And I will say, it's still the same feeling. Yeah, this is my 31st book, okay?
I was thinking it was over 30.
But when I hold Atlantis Lost, it's that very first copy, it's just like holding a newborn baby.
Yeah, right.
And it's the closest feeling to giving birth I ever get to have.
Yeah, right.
But I also, you know, in this particular one, Atlantis, I wanted to add something brand new to the myth, and I really feel like we've been able to do that.
Yeah. So tell us, what are you hearing from kids now that they know that the third book is out, or maybe kids who aren't even new to your books altogether?
Well, you know, one thing I'm hearing from kids is that even though it took those 3 books for me 5 years to write, I have had 3 kids today tell me they read the whole series in a weekend. So I try not to let them rub that in too much, but you know, in fact, that's what I want. But
see, that shows that they can't put them down.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
right.
I have learned one thing, being a dad of 5 kids, is there's great value in cliffhangers.
Right,
so, but the pace is good, the characters. I'll tell you one thing, a boy named Peter told me at one of the schools today. He said, Mr. Barron, I like it. He's a very thoughtful kid. He said, I like it when I have a story I like, when there are characters who feel alive, and at the same time, when I am in a place that feels like a great magical spot I want to go back to. And he said, you know, usually books hit 1 or 2 of those, you hit all 3. Yeah. And I would have jumped through
Huge
the
compliment.
roof if I could.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
It was
That's
so
great.
Yeah.
So the first book in the trilogy was Atlantis Rising. So tell us where the inspiration, the seed started to grow for these stories, because you've created something very new about the whole myth of Atlantis and the lore.
Becky, I have always loved Atlantis as a story. It's one of the greatest stories of all time for a reason. And it has that tragic finale always. It's about the destruction of Atlantis. But in the hundreds of years that it's been told, in fact, it's been told since Plato kicked it off, it's always centered on that destruction. And that's part of its power. I've loved that, but I've always wondered, you know, I know how it was destroyed, but how was it created? Right. How did it actually begin? Right. Sure. And that's where Atlantis Rising comes in. So I want to know, what were the dramas involved? Who were the young heroes, the girl and the boy in the middle of the story? What was at stake? What did they do? What were the heroic and miraculous things they had to pull off? Right. And ultimately, even in triumph, in making Atlantis happen, how did the seeds of its ultimate destruction get planted? Right.
So the research, you know, looking back at different ways that the story of Atlantis has been told. Did you do some of that? And I know you did your own world building, you know, in this, which you do very well.
Well, thank you.
So I want to know what you did in the research, and what of that did you put into this world, and the rules and the look of it, and all the different senses of what this world is.
Honestly, I did a lot of research, just as I did in the Merlin saga, a lot of Celtic lore and myth and ballads. I did in the Atlantis story, because it has to feel authentic to people. So there's a very Greek mythic feel to this place, and at the same time, you know, I had to understand how the Greek ships would have looked and what they would have done, and then I could extrapolate to what kinds of advanced technologies they might have found, what sort of magical beings would be on this island after it was created, and that's where I wove in my new layers. I did I'd say 6 months solid of research about the archaeology of Atlantis and about everything that we know today and the different theories about where Atlantis really was.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I wanted this to be an ecological fable as well.
Right.
So I made Atlantis filled with all the mythic creatures from all around the world and all the beautiful, wondrous beings that we now have still on the planet Earth.
Yeah.
So, so there was a lot to save.
Right, to say by creating this city, this island, this place that's by itself. So.
Exactly.
So the
most
protagonist,
magical place on Earth.
right? So the protagonist in this, and you know, you have Promi. I guess it'd be Promi, like Prometheus,
That's right.
right?
That's
and Atlanta, and he's the immortal, she is the mortal.
Yes.
And so where did their DNA come from? Because what I loved about them is they have their flaws just like any person.
Yeah.
They have their problems just like any person, and that's what makes the story more real, even in its fantastical setting. So, so where did they come from for you?
Well, look, full-blown characters have to have that full, meaningful authenticity, right? And for me, it comes from really ultimately getting to know them so well. I have conversations with them. I ask my characters not just where did you come from, what do you look like, how do you talk, what are your favorite things to do. It's much deeper than that. You have to ask, what are you afraid of? What are your real fears? What are your highest, greatest aspirations? And then ultimately, at the very end of that process, I ask the big question, which is, what is your deepest, darkest secret?
Right.
And when they answer me in their own voice, then I know they're alive enough that I can bring them to life for the reader. And that's the real fun part. That's, by the way, where, yes, Promi's immortal and Atlanta is mortal. And so ultimately there's a setup here for a possibility of love that could never, ever be consummated because they live in different worlds. But I made it so that it was a surprise to both of them who was which. And it's only through the revelations of Promi's journals that ultimately you get some clues. And so that, you know, the layering is complicated because humans are complicated.
Oh, for sure.
So they have to be believable is the most important thing. They have to walk off the page. If they come alive for me, they'll come alive for readers.
Well, and that's why any fantastical world in fantasy or anything, when you create those real human conditions, it makes all of it. You are in that world. You know, you are totally there.
That's the whole idea.
Yeah, right.
It's the best place to travel.
So I love the way when you think of the first book, Atlantis Rising, it's really the prequel to the story that we think we all know.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, which is great.
And it's just like there's, you know, this wondrous myth that's persisted for a long time, but there was a big gap. And in telling the beginning, I got to set up the ending so that it has a twist. So that even though Atlantis does get destroyed, no spoilers, but I will tell you that there just might be a way that Atlantis is still with us here now.
Right. So this is my question. You know, when you talk about all the books you've written in your Merlin, you know, The Lost Years of Merlin, it's 12 books, you know, 12 books. And thinking about the Merlin legend, King Arthur, all of those things, and now thinking about Atlantis, what do you truly believe? Or is that something you don't want to say? Because I always wanted to believe the Arthurian legends and Merlin and everything that went along with those because I truly believe that he existed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
so I want to know what kids say to you. Do they believe that Atlantis exists, or do they believe that Merlin?
I believe it exists, and
Okay.
here's how.
Okay.
It doesn't matter to me whether the historians who say yes, there was indeed a Merlin figure, a druid master in the 5th century Great Britain, are right or wrong. It doesn't really matter in the end. What matters is that Merlin exists in our hearts as one of the greatest characters of all times.
For sure.
That's why we're still telling stories about it. And you know, people like me, you know, nutball writer from Colorado, I'm adding another thread into that beautiful tapestry of myth. But it will continue to be told about, sung about, and beloved across the centuries to come, because Merlin is such a wondrous character. So he's very much alive in the human heart, and ever more so now, because Merlin stands for universality of all people. He is a druid, so he learns his greatest, deepest lessons from nature, and protecting nature and listening to nature is core to his being. So, and those are themes that we need all the more these days.
We do, especially now.
Especially now.
Yeah.
So with all those reasons, he's very much alive. I think Atlantis is very much alive, because Atlantis is a cautionary tale about how humanity has the greatest abilities to build and create, but we can also be captured by greed or hate or divisiveness. And in that realm, all of that intolerance, all that fear and greed can lead to our destruction.
Right. Very, very true. So, in this series, your bad guys are very evil. I'm going to tell you, you did a very good job. So the evil priest Gurkar, right?
Yes.
Grukar, and the evil spirit warlord
Narkazan.
Yes. I love that name.
Yeah.
So where did these evil guys come from?
Well, I can't reveal too much, but I will tell you that if you pay attention to the world around us, you see it all. And people sometimes are surprised to hear this from a fantasy writer. Look, my job is to create these imaginary, bizarre, wondrous places, right?
Yeah.
Magical places. But my ideas, all of them, come from the real world. And that includes the complex villains who still have a life and a prehistory and places where they could have gone a different direction but fell into the path of fear and greed. Or it also applies to the heroes, to the Promis and Atlantas, who ultimately rise to the greatest sacrifice imaginable, but might have fallen flat on their faces. But they found the courage, the compassion, the perseverance, the love to rise above that. So, all humanity has that potential to go to light places or dark places. And that's part of the beauty of fantasy. I really think it's this gorgeous bent mirror that tells us about ourselves and our world, even though it's really a fantastical imaginary world.
Yeah. Where did your love of fantasy start? How old were you, do you think?
I think I was probably a kid sitting around a campfire when I was 7 or 8 years old, and someone told a story that just made me lean forward, and through the crackling flames I could feel I was in another place, another realm.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to travel to those places ever since.
Yeah. So, talking about the Merlin series, what do you think? And I know there's a movie in the works, yes. So tell us a little bit about that, because they're so visual, and I think kids have been waiting so long for these to come to the big screen. So tell us a little bit about that. Is that going to happen? Do you think?
It is going to happen. I will tell you right now, though, I would rather have no movie at all than a mediocre movie. I'd much rather have no movie.
Yeah.
But And in fact, I've proven that by actually seizing the rights back from a major motion picture studio that was going to make a movie, but it was going to be much more dark and violent than I wanted. I've also seen a lot of attempts that really weren't right, and ultimately I've found a home, though, with Disney, of a studio that's got the right sensibility. They understand that this is a truly exciting, adventurous tale about the great wizard Merlin, but when he was a lad, and when he was so much not a powerful wizard that he was barely alive, had no memory of his past, had no idea who he was, and he was so weak, he was almost drowned. To go right from there to the ultimate high point of being the greatest wizard of all times is a big journey. That's the excitement. But in that journey, Becky, if it's authentic, there's a metaphor about how every child from every background, from every description, even in the hardest times, we've all felt washed ashore, right? At different ways, different times in our lives. But every child has the capacity to rise to something brilliant, something heroic, something even magical. So that's I think the power of it, and Disney is going to do it that way. I'll tell you one great piece of news, which is they have hired as the scriptwriter Philippa Boyens, who is the woman who was the primary scriptwriter with Peter Jackson of
Oh, that's right.
the
Yes,
Lord of the
yes.
Rings
Oh,
movies.
cool.
So if you
That's very
Google
cool.
Philippa, you'll
Yeah,
see her
sure.
standing there with Peter and Fran Walsh holding the Oscar for The Return of the King.
King.
And they, Philippa, honestly, she is such a master storyteller. Even though her realm is a different one than the novels, I've had so much flexibility, and I can go with subplots. I can have. There's more than 150 characters in all the different Merlin saga books, but a screenplay has to be more visual and more dialogue oriented. It's a different medium.
Sure.
It's a little bit like the difference between an epic poem and a haiku poem. But they're both really, really powerful ways to tell a story or convey an idea. She's a master. She's so good at the screenplay. For the very first time, I totally trust her judgment and what she's doing. At the same time, I'm watching like a hawk to defend Merlin
Well, sure,
and the essence of those books.
Right.
And she's being very true to it. She refers to the Merlin saga. She's read the 12 books several times. She refers to them as the source material, which I really I kind of
well, sort of like when you were
feel
researching even before starting the Merlin. It's like that's source material.
Yeah, that's the source material.
Right. That's so
she,
wonderful.
She refers to the Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion, Tolkien's books as that source material, and then she says, "Now, the Merlin
that's
saga.
So cool.
This is the source material."
Oh, we can't wait. We can't wait.
It's going to be great.
Yeah. What I love about your books, and it's not about the tales of heroics, and these you really do. I mean, everything is so absolutely wonderful about the heroics that happen in these things. But it's also your love of nature and ecology, and you are a well-known conservationist in Colorado and nationally. You are known. So those beliefs and putting those into your books, that passion that you have for making every child feel that they have that within them to be a hero, but also making them be heroes of the natural world. So tell us a little bit about that and your own endeavors in ecology.
Well, I'm so glad, first of all, that comes through, because honestly, that's been my life experience. Nature, being out in nature is the place where I can feel both infinitely small, really humbled and reduced, and at the same time enlarged and magnified, because we're all part of that great creation. When I'm sleeping out under the stars at a Rocky Mountain night, or in the redwood forests of Northern California or the Northwest, or out on a kayak in a great wondrous morning at dawn, or on a seacoast by the ocean that's so vast it's unfathomable, I feel tiny and huge at the same time. Nature does that. So nature gives us that opportunity to feel connected beyond all of ourselves and enlivened. And also it's a healer, it's a teacher, it's a mentor, it's an inspiration. And in all of those ways, I hope to convey through my stories those wondrous powers of the natural world that frankly are more miraculous than any of the fantastical beings or places that I write about. I'll go one step further. I think because I started as a nature writer before I began writing fantasy, I feel like nature in my books is not just a backdrop. It's not just the scenery. It's actually a kind of character. It has to come alive and have all the complexities and nuances and contradictions and mood swings and everything else and mysteries that a human character would have. And if that happens, then we have this wondrous, fantastical place, whether it's Fenkyra or Atlantis or some other place, but where nature is real and it's a form of character.
Right. Oh, for sure. It is definitely a character. And I hope that's what will be captured in the films, because definitely nature is a character within the Merlin story.
Disney is all over that, I will tell you. They really understand that.
And going back to being a hero, you named a prize after your mom, the Gloria Barron Prize for Young Heroes. Tell us about some of the kids who have won the prize and what they did, because how incredibly inspiring for all of us, but for other kids.
On this book tour, Becky, I'm in 15 different states this fall with my book tour, and I have actually gotten to meet 3 of the kids who are winners from this year, who've shown up with their families at different places. One in San Francisco, one in Montana, Bozeman, one back in New York City. And, look, one of them is a kid who actually had an encounter with a blind person and realized that the blind need to walk with that cane, and he saw that, but he's also an inventive kid, and he said, why not, let's broaden the range of that cane by using electronics. So
Wow.
suddenly he has a cane that gives touch signals about whether a bus is coming down the street, or whether the light is green and you can walk, or any number of things that are obstacles on the way, a fire hydrant or whatever, that the cane may not tell you because it only reaches 4 feet long. And he's just this wonderful, wonderful young man who's invented that. I also met the boy who campaigned since he was 8 years old to protect the nautilus, which is a wondrous spiral-shaped
Right,
creature,
yeah.
and it's in our oceans, on the coral reefs in particular, and it dates back 300 million years, but it's endangered both by climate change and also by ocean pollution, and he's pushed so hard that the United Nations just 2 months ago approved listing the nautilus as its highest level of protection.
Wow.
As a creature that deserves attention and protection across the planet. That's just 2 examples. There's a young woman who's really one of my favorites. She's full of energy and wisdom, and she's interested in helping people who have not learned how to speak English learn the English language, and so she's created this host of volunteers, over 300 volunteers, young people who read in English, something that gives a young person a way of understanding how it's spoken. And so whatever background, her background happens to be Chinese, but it could be people from any part of the world. It's one of the great strengths of America, is we have all this wondrous diversity. She's helping them learn how to speak English and be part of that larger society. So, and she's done it with such grace. Her name is Ellie. She's wondrous. Anyway, all of these are kids that are really out there, and my point about the prize is really to just turn the spotlight on the fact there are these wonderful, heroic kids who, like Merlin, I would say, have been in a tough point in their life. They were washed ashore. They were lost and alone. They maybe had no sense of really what they could possibly do, but they dug deep. They found the bravery, the compassion, the perseverance to not only help themselves, but they actually made the world a better place. And we need to share more of those stories.
Oh, for sure.
We have a lot of dystopian and upsetting and dark tales for good reasons, because there's a lot to be upset about and concerned about, especially for our young people. My heart breaks for the world that we're handing our young people in many ways, but we also have tales of wondrous heroism and inspiration that are very real stories. And that's, in fact, why I named the prize after my mother, because she was one of those quiet, unsung heroes who was a teacher her whole life. And, those are the people, the parents, the grandparents, the teachers, the librarians, the booksellers, the clergymen, the whoever, who really work with kids, help kids. The kid on the playground that stands up for somebody else who's being bullied, those are the heroes. And they hold our world together. We deserve to celebrate them and share their stories.
For sure, for sure. And your books do that too.
Thank you, Becky.
No, that's great.
Thank you.
So I know you've talked about your 5 kids and your wife. They're your first readers.
They are.
So are they kind? Are they good editors? Are they first readers? Do they tell you that what needs to be changed? So how does that work when your family's reading your book?
First of all, they're really, really honest.
Okay,
and that helps
all right.
a lot. I've had some tough comments, but it's always helpful. I really want any book that ultimately has my name on it, I want it to be the best it can be, right?
Sure.
And I'm blessed with these 5 kids who are smarter than I am, and they have a great sense of humor and wonder, but they're dead honest.
Oh, that's great.
And that's the best
That's great.
thing.
Yeah. It's
So
nice
is
to
my
have that
wife.
first layer. So probably when it gets to your editor, it's probably better.
It is much better, thanks to all of them, no question.
No, that's
and I
great.
also have practice around the breakfast table. I figure if I can keep 5 kids focused and awake at breakfast and not falling asleep in their cereal bowl by telling a story about what I'm working on, then I have a shot to make it work.
Yeah. So what is your earliest recollection of wanting to be a writer? Do you remember how old you were?
I think it was actually when I wrote completely made up expose about the secret of what actually happened inside the locked doors of the teacher's lounge when I was a third grader. And that story actually got me into a heap of trouble because I was guessing too right about who was having an affair with who and all the rest. But I was and who was chewing what and all of those things. But you know, people were so interested in the story because I was having a great time telling it, and I realized, you know, if I'm having fun telling a story, people will feel that fun, and that was exciting. Sure. So I guess you could say that was my first bestseller.
All right, very good. People loved it too. Okay, so what are you working on now?
I will also tell you that my very first novel got rejected by 32 publishers, so I had to really sit back and realize, you know what, I still want to try this stuff, and that's why I tried again.
Oh yeah, and that perseverance, and look
but
where you
it's
are.
about if you have a sense of what you do love, indeed, you need to honor that and give it as many tries as it takes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what am I working on now? Honestly, I'm spending most of my creative energy, for the first time in 20 years, I don't know what book is next. So my creative energy is going to the movie and trying to help it be as authentic and true to the essence of the Merlin saga
because I think
as
there's been some authors who haven't had that access, and the movies have not turned out the way they should have. And many disappointed readers who love the books.
Exactly. So I'm all over this.
Okay.
But I will say it's just the right team. Disney has put together an amazing team.
Okay, Tom, I do these interviews with a little quiz at the end.
All right.
So you know all the answers. They're all book related. So it's kind of lightning round. So the first thing that comes to your mind. What was your favorite book when you were a child?
A Wrinkle in Time.
Okay, how about if you could live in the world of a book? What book would that be? You don't have to stay there forever, but if you could even visit it.
Oh, I would totally go to Finkyra and hang out with Merlin.
Okay.
I would.
I like that answer.
I would totally be there.
Okay.
In fact, I will tell you this. Today some kid asked me, okay, if you weren't an author, what would you like to be? And I said, well, I would love to be a wizard. And I have to say, that would be the best.
That would be very cool. Okay, if you could have a dinner, you and 3 authors, alive or dead, who would those 3 be?
I would choose J.R.R. Tolkien.
Okay.
I would choose Madeleine L'Engle, who was a dear friend, and I'd love to continue many other conversations. I'd love to have her with her now. And I think I would also choose, let me think. I think I would choose Rachel Carson.
Oh, wow.
Who wrote with such great courage, even to her dying day, she wrote about the planet with such compassion. And at the same time, she loved the fact that her 4-year-old nephew was so emotionally excited by just playing in the shores of the coast of Maine. She never lost that child in herself, even as a great scientist.
Right. Okay, and how about books a favorite book you shared with your kids you'd love to curl up and read with them?
Yeah, you know, we've read so many books, but I have to tell you, honestly, that the highest and best moment of being a dad was when one of my kids pulled off the shelf this book about Merlin and said, "This looks cool." He didn't know who had written it. And it was My Little Redhead, and I said, "Oh wow, that looks interesting. Let's read it." And he didn't know it was by me until we got all the way through. At the end of the book, he said, "Wow, Dad, you know, this sounds a little bit like you." And I said, "Well, you know, there's a reason for that." And so it was just one of the greatest joys. We were on the maroon-colored little big chair that was in our sitting room, and you know this, and of course reading aloud to a bright kid is one of the high points of anybody's life, but that was extra special.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, A+, 100%, good score.
Thank you, Becky. Listen, great to talk with you.
Okay, great to talk with you, Tom. Thank you so much, and congratulations on the end of the trilogy with Atlantis Lost.
It's exciting.
Yeah, thanks.
We've given birth to triplets now.
Hey, congrats. Thanks.
Thank you, Becky.
Great conversation with young adult author T.A. Barron about his new book. It's the final book in the Atlantis series. It's called Atlantis Lost. Everyone knows him from his Merlin Saga series. Great fantasies for young adult readers. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.